All right, good morning, everybody. The time is 10 o'clock, and I'll call the October 10th, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order. We are joined by our Vice Chair Bailey. Good morning, Ms. Bailey.
Good morning.
We have Commissioner Giraldo.
Good morning.
And we have Commissioner Washington.
Good morning.
And I'm Chair Shapiro. And please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration and for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. And registered speakers may join the meeting with the link provided in the email provided by the planning board office, or may listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. And of course, anyone may tune in to watch the planning board meeting via live stream. If you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use our online web form, which you'll see referenced on the screen. In addition to our commissioners, we are joined by Ms. Tellerico, our associate counsel. We have Jessica Jones, our planning board administrator, Sherry Connor, the acting development review division chief, and Rhonda Ford, our technical hearing writer, and staff members Kenneth Flanagan and Ryan Cron are helping us with technology behind the scenes ably as always. We are going to run through the order of cases as listed on the agenda. And let us begin with item 2. I would look for a motion to approve our draft minutes from October 3, 2024.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Washington. With no discussion, I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
This conference will be recorded. Muted.
I heard a vote aye. I'll vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Kenny or Ryan? Everything all right?
We're good.
Okay. There are no legislative items this week. We'll move on to item 3C in our agenda, Information Management Division, Planning Data Journal on Net Migration. We have a presentation by the staff. I will turn it over. Mr. Knister, you're there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good morning, Chair Shapiro.
Take it away, introduce you and your team, and take it away.
Well, good morning again, Chair Shapiro and members of the Planning Board. I'm Jim Knister, Division Chief of the Information Management Division. The Planning Department continues to expand its research and analysis capabilities. The research section now consists of 4 persons and provides various types of research reports. Examples include a townhouse report, the annual growth report, and a recent report on employment trends and dynamics. We are currently finalizing an office conditions report. In addition to our research reports, we also provide population, housing, and employment forecasts, census support, and research services to the Planning Department and a wide variety of other constituents. Our goal today is to brief you and to see if you have any comments on a new report series we're referring to as a data journal series, and our first report in that series. The data journal series is intended to be a periodic 2 to 3 times a year, very visual briefing on demographic, socioeconomic, or planning data topics of interest. The first report in that series we intend to produce is on data migration in Prince George's County. And Quy Zhao, our supervisor of the research section, will discuss the highlights of that effort. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, Kenneth.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Quy Zhao, Planning Supervisor for the research section under Mr. Knister's supervision. The first issue of the Planning Data Journal series is about net migration in Prince George's County in 2010 and 2020. Net migration, per the U.S. Census Bureau's definition, is the difference between inbound movement and outbound movement of population to and from a county or city. If net migration is positive, then the reference county or city gains population from other places. The data on net migration in this snapshot report, or AKA Planning Data Journal, are collected and tabulated by the U.S. Census Bureau from a small sample size for a 5-year average of annual estimates. This pie chart on this slide shows that among all 110,000 movers in Prince George's County in year 2020, 28% in orange color moved from another state to the county, and 23%, which is in dark purple color, moved from the county to another state, from our Prince George's County to another state. In other words, Prince George's County gained population from other states via a positive net migration in year 2020. Within Maryland, among all movers in 2020, 23%, which is in the light gray color, of the county's residents relocated to other counties within the state, whereas 19%, which is in darker gray, of all movers migrated to the county from elsewhere in the state of Maryland. The remaining 7%, which is in kind of tan color, of movers of the county in 2020 was due to international migration, which was about 7,000 persons or so. Next slide, please. The county has gained population mainly from the District of Columbia in 2010 and 2020. In 2020, the county's population growth was also attributable to net migration from our neighboring Montgomery County. And there are also other counties in Central Maryland and also Northern Virginia who contributed to the county's population growth via the positive net migration to Prince George's County. Next slide, please. Thank you. The county residents who moved out were more likely to go reside in Anne Arundel, Charles, or Howard counties in 2010 and 2020. This illustrative map on this slide shows the top 10 counties where Prince George's County's out-migration took place in 2020. Those top 10 counties are shaded in dark green on the map, and also numbered per the rankings of the top 10 counties where the county residents choose to relocate to. Next slide, please. Thank you. The research section will continue to produce comprehensive planning reports to support policy making and program formulation. There are new reports in the works, as Mr. Canestra indicated early on. The office report is at the last stage of approval. This report emphasizes privately owned office buildings, providing a comprehensive overview of the office market throughout Prince George's County, such as inventory, year built, office classes, demolitions, vacancy rate, rentable square footage, and market asking rent. So I would like to turn it over back to Mr. Canestra for the very last slide.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. In addition to making you aware of some of the topics in our work program, the goal or the guidance we're looking for today is really just to confirm we're on the right track with developing this data journal series. And as Kui mentioned, the first report in that series is on data migration. Subsequent reports will be on the Hispanic population, the elderly population, and so forth. We welcome any feedback from you, on the content of any of these reports, what feedback you'd like to provide as we produce them, and any topics that may be of particular interest to the planning board as we move forward. That concludes our presentation. We'll open it up for any questions, and thank you for your time again.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you for that. And commissioners, obviously there's a lot more to say and think about with this, but I think it's important that they're coming to us with their work plan related to this, getting the information out on a more regular basis, not just to the public, but to us as well, so we can help guide them as they go through this process. So I couldn't be happier that you're moving in this direction and that you're also doing it in a way that is more as transparent as possible for us and for the public. So, but commissioners, any thoughts, questions, reactions from what you have heard?
No, I just join with your comments, Mr. Chairman. I think this is excellent. And although it's just a work plan, I see a lot of potential with regards to, countries we should be marketing to, other counties, locations. I think that the utility of a report like this is just, I couldn't even put a number on it. So I salute you all for the initiative, and I'm excited and looking forward to the final report, or the next part before we get to the final report. So
Right.
thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to associate myself with the comments of both of you. I think this is a very interesting and a report, and it gives us food for thought and it helps us to guide some of the decisions that we recommend to the elected officials, I think, in the future regarding what the county looks like and what it should look like and what we're doing and how we are doing. So
Exactly.
thank you very much. Very interesting.
I share in your comments, Mr. Chair, as well as my colleagues. I did have a question. Is the plan also going to involve finding out as best you can the reason why people are moving out of Prince George's and going into the other two surrounding counties?
In some of the cases, yes. When that factual information is available, we will be certainly providing that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Job well done.
Yes.
Thank you for that good question. And I want to join with Vice Chair Bailey that, it's screamingly obvious how this could be a tool for the county executive, for the council, to help guide them and shape them as they make decisions as well. So really appreciate the work and could see all sorts of ways in which this could be very impactful. So thank you, team, for the good start with this and for educating us about this process. And we certainly look forward to more.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. All right. Moving on our agenda, move on to item 3D on our agenda. This is Community Planning Division, Central Avenue, Blue Silver Line Sector Plan and Sectional Map Amendment. This is an action item. Their staff is looking for approval and transmittal of an extension request to the District Council. We will turn it over to staff. We have Mr. Skibinski and Corey Arsenault, who are going to be giving a presentation.
Yes, and good morning, Chair Shapiro, members of the board. Bill Skibinski. I'm a Planner 3 in the Long Range Planning section, and I'm the project manager for the Central Avenue Blue Silver Line Sector Plan and Sectional Map Amendment. Since the Deputy Project Manager, Elena Perry, could not join us this morning, I'll be co-presenting with Corey Arsenault, Planner 2, also in the Long Range Planning section. Next slide, please. Since our last briefing in February, we wanted to update you on the status of the sector plan and SMA and to request an extension on the permission to print date, along with transmitting the request to the District Council for approval. This presentation will also cover the public participation program, major challenges and proposed recommendations, urban design visualizations developed with our consultant, proposed zoning changes, and we'll conclude with the extension request and updated schedule. Next slide, please. This brief overview of the sector plan area will highlight its geographic placement, councilmatic districts, and key locations. Next slide, please. The sector plan area is east of the Washington, D.C. line, inside the Capitol Beltway, with Central Avenue and the Metro Blue Silver Line corridor bisecting the area. Next slide, please. This map highlights the 3 councilmatic districts within the plant area. The project team has been briefing each council member throughout the planning process and will continue working with them to refine the plan. Next slide, please. Some of the key locations in the plant area include the city of Seat Pleasant, as shown in yellow, a portion of the town of Capitol Heights, shown in orange, the Capitol Heights, Addison Road, Seat Pleasant, and Morgan Boulevard metro stations, and of course the stadium property. Next slide, please. And now I'll turn it over to Corey, who will take us through a summary of the public participation program.
Good morning. As Bill mentioned, I'm Corey Arsenault, Planner 2 in the Long Range Planning section and a core team member on this project. I'll jump into a summary of the public participation program. Because long-term residents perceive that there hasn't been much change, attention, or investment here in the last few decades, they're fairly receptive of our information and were willing to meet with us. Next slide, please. During the implementation of the 10-month public participation program, our team attended many events, handed out, gathered information, asked and answered questions, shared existing conditions information, and ultimately found out what residents like and dislike about the area. We attended community events such as Capitol Heights Day last June, office hour events at the 3 community centers in the plan area, pop-up events at all 3 metro stations. We also hosted online engagement activities, one where we released draft vision statements for public comment. We shared notifications for these events online and distributed over 3,000 flyers to apartment complexes and food distribution sites in the plan area. This outreach information informed the initial draft of our vision statement, goals, and urban design visualizations that we presented at the March open house events. Next slide, please. Thank you. Overall, during meetings, events, and activities, we consistently heard about the need for a grocery store or more fresh food access in general. We also heard about the need for new business and retail options, as well as recreational activities, especially those for youth and seniors. Lastly, we heard about the need for increased personal safety. From the open house, we gained the understanding that most attendees were in favor of increased density around the metro stations to add activity and bring amenities and opportunity to the area. Next slide, please. If granted the extension, we would like to do another round of community engagement and share the draft plan with key community leaders, as well as municipal mayors and councils. We'll give them time to review the document, respond to conversation prompts, and host 2 online workshops to hear their feedback and suggestions. Now I'll pass it back to Bill to present challenges and recommendations.
All right, thanks, Corey. This section will highlight a selection of key challenges identified during the public participation process, along with proposed recommendations to start addressing these issues. Next slide, please. So starting off with the land use element, some of the challenges were the area is predominantly low density single family housing and requires targeted rezoning and land consolidation to support more diverse development. Some recommendations include to rezone land inside the local transit centers to permit higher density and create walkable, transit accessible shopping and dining destinations. For economic prosperity, there's fluctuating market demand that's affecting project feasibility and timelines. While reinvestment is needed in key corridors like Martin Luther King Jr. Highway, Old Central Avenue, and of course Central Avenue, these areas have untapped potential for revitalization, requiring updated designs for aging buildings and new development on vacant or underutilized properties, including parking lots. Some recommendations are to focus on revitalizing retail spaces, promoting local businesses, and strengthening workforce development initiatives. Next slide, please. For transportation and mobility, the area lacks strong infrastructure for non-motorized transportation, and pedestrian safety is a concern. Some recommendations include developing a connected network of paths and sidewalks and improve road safety through traffic calming measures on key streets. For natural environment, climate change and steep slopes present challenges for new development. Some recommendations include investing in water quality and stormwater infrastructure, establishing conservation easements, prioritizing redevelopment of existing sites. Next slide, please. For housing in neighborhoods, there's insufficient housing variety and inventory across different price points. So we'd like to develop diverse and affordable housing types, including missing middle and infill development. For community heritage, culture, and design, a need exists for public spaces that reflect a cohesive community identity as the area grows. Additionally, dumping and littering are ongoing issues. Some recommendations include celebrating the area's history and culture through placemaking, branding, and urban design that strengthens social ties and public safety by incorporating crime prevention through environmental design principles. Next slide, please. For healthy communities, there are no large grocery retailers serving the planned area, and there is a $1.3 billion healthcare investment gap, particularly in inner Beltway communities. So we'd like to develop a connected food oasis network of sites producing fresh food and prioritize investment in healthcare infrastructure to close the gap over the next 10 plus years. And lastly, for public facilities, as mentioned, public safety concerns need to be addressed, and additional investment is needed for neighborhood growth projects, including parks and recreation facilities for youth and seniors. So we'd like to expand and upgrade parks, recreation areas, and public facilities to support economic development and improve community services. Next slide, please. Now back to Corey to take us through some of the urban design visualizations.
Thank you, Bill. We have renderings for the area around Capitol Heights, Old Central Avenue, Martin Luther King Jr. Highway, Addison Road, Seat Pleasant, Morgan Boulevard, and the stadium area. Next slide, please. The first visualizations are at and around the Capitol Heights Metro Station, the station furthest to the west, adjacent to the DC border. Next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
The community and market-informed vision statement imagines that the area around the metro feels like a small town, with neighborhoods serving retail and gathering spaces. Upgraded streets and a linear greenway provide safe north to south connection from the metro station to a new plaza along Old Central Avenue. Next slide, please. The bird's eye view looks south from East Capitol Street to Old Central Ave. This visual manifests the vision of the area by showing 6 to 7 story buildings along East Capitol Street and near the metro station that scales down towards the existing neighborhoods using missing middle housing as a transition. The visualization also shows smaller block sizes in a more compact and walkable urban form. Next slide, please. The street level view focuses in on the neighborhood retail area along Old Central Ave. Along this revitalized corridor, 3 to 4 story buildings support a variety of ground floor activity, and townhomes smooth the transition from these buildings to the existing single family homes. Next slide, please. Moving north, we look at a segment of MD 704, Martin Luther King Jr. Highway, that we're calling a neighborhood retail focus area. Next slide, please. In this view, the DC border is towards the top of the image. The focus area includes a mix of uses along the corridor. Underutilized properties are a major opportunity for redevelopment into 3 to 4 story mixed-use buildings with ground floor retail. Next slide, please. We also have a visualization for the Addison Road Seat Pleasant area, just east of Capitol Heights. Next slide, please. From community engagement and market research, we imagine this area as having a mix of housing and amenities, a diversity of dining and shopping options, and it is a destination for locals and visitors alike. Addison Road itself is envisioned as a safe north and south connection for Seat Pleasant. Next slide, please. This visual is looking down Central Avenue from the west to the east. The urban design here is similar to that at Capitol Heights, where 6 to 7 story mixed-use buildings line Central Avenue and frame the metro station. This height and density subtly transitions into the existing neighborhoods with the use of medium-density housing. The additional building frontage and scale seeks to create a compact walkable form in line with transit-oriented development best practices. Next slide, please. The street level views of a plaza along the north side of Central Avenue, where the Addison Plaza Shopping Center is currently. This rendering shows the potential for a rich mixture of uses that lend themselves to people living, working, playing, and shopping here. Next slide, please. Morgan Boulevard is the easternmost local transit center in the plan area. The renderings here focused around the wooded areas between the Metro and Central Avenue to the south. Next slide, please. The intent of the plan for this area and the stadium property to the north is to be a national destination for sports and entertainment and health and wellness oriented uses. Next slide, please. This is shown as an activated urban area complete with 6 to 7 story buildings along Central Avenue, next to the station, and along the linear greenway connecting to the metro. This development includes the proposed amphitheater and seeks to intermix residential, commercial, historic, and entertainment spaces to create a walkable destination. Next slide. The pedestrian scale here shows someone leaving the metro station and stepping out into a welcoming, exciting environment, a stark contrast from the expansive parking lot on site today. Next slide, please. The last visualizations we have are for the stadium property. We're moving forward with 2 different scenarios for this large site, one that includes the stadium and one that does not. Next slide, please. In the first scenario, the team leaves and the stadium is demolished. On the site, we imagine other sports and recreation uses supporting what's already available at the Sports and Learning Complex to create a national destination. There's a large indoor facility and a variety of fields, complemented with a residential mix of multifamily buildings and townhomes. Next slide, please. This perspective highlights the scale of the indoor arena, the presence of sports courts and fields, and the new roadway network. Next slide, please. The pedestrian scale here shows the orientation of residences to recreational activities to promote an active lifestyle. Next slide, please. And counter to this is scenario 2, where the football team stays on site but moves their stadium to a different location on the property. Next slide, please. Entertainment and commercial uses fronting the pedestrian plaza would help to create an exciting game day experience and activate this area constantly, making the site a true asset to the community. Supporting residential uses are woven throughout the area at a scale that makes sense in relation to the existing neighborhoods along Morgan Boulevard. Next slide, please. The street level experience here is an exciting mix of restaurants and shops situated beneath large multifamily apartment buildings, allowing people to easily access amenities as well as the stadium and the Morgan Boulevard Metro. I'll pass it back to Bill to touch on the zoning changes needed to make these illustrations a reality.
All right, great. Thanks, Corey. So now I'll cover the SMA's proposed zoning changes, all focused on implementing the plan's vision. Next slide, please. Here's a map of the existing zoning, which is predominantly residential with areas of industrial and transit-oriented zones in the local transit centers. Next slide, please. This map highlights the proposed zoning changes, with the most notable being the rezoning to the LTO-E zone, shown in pink, within the local transit centers and the stadium property. Other significant changes include establishing neighborhood retail areas along Martin Luther King Jr. Highway in Sea Pleasant and Old Central Avenue in Capitol Heights. We also propose expanding the ROS zone to safeguard open space along with public and historic facilities. I'd also like to mention that both municipalities have been briefed on these changes and there were no objections were raised. Next slide, please. Once approved, the new zoning map will incorporate these updates. In areas where the LTO zone extends beyond the local transit center, those center boundaries will expand accordingly, with the most significant change being the extension of the Morgan Boulevard local transit center boundary to include the stadium property. Next slide, please. Now I will discuss the extension request and proposed schedule. Next slide. We are requesting a 4-month extension due to the expanded public participation program, the departure of key staff, and the need to allow state and county agencies, key stakeholders, and elected officials adequate time to review and provide feedback before finalizing the plan and seeking permission to print. So we are officially asking the planning board to approve and transmit this extension request to the district council. Next slide, please. If the 4-month extension is approved, the updated project timeline will have a new permission to print date in the second half of March of 2025. Next slide, please. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you all very much for your time and attention, and the project team will now take any questions you may have.
Thank you, team. Let me just say first, inspiring. There's the potential is huge. Let me turn to my colleagues to see if you have any thoughts, questions, reactions from what we've seen before we consider the extension request.
I have a comment or a question. Good job. I like the possibilities that exist. With regards to the section on the food where you noted that there's a food oasis, are you going to put together any strategies for eliminating or working towards eliminating the food oasis?
I'm sorry, towards eliminating a food oasis?
Eliminating, yes.
Well, we'd like to create more of what we're calling a food oasis. So that includes some smaller scale, community neighborhood level, food distribution centers, increasing things like farmers markets, community supported agriculture, urban agriculture, indoor vertical farming, things of that nature, along with trying to attract some form of national grocer retailer.
Right. Okay. Have you guys considered any strategy for trying to attract the larger box store? You know, for example, a Trader's, Harris
Sure.
Teeter.
Yeah, the plan can't necessarily really determine who and precisely where they will go, but we can set the stage for that through certain rezoning in key areas where that type of operation may be compatible, as well as really just marketing and promoting the area as an up and coming area, promoting the various incentive programs that we have through grants and tax abatement incentives and so forth.
So one thing that I understand, or from conversations that I've had with the reluctance of some of the box stores moving in, is the prohibition on big box stores selling beer and wine, because that always seems to be beer and wine. Oh, in a regular food store, the products themselves, the food and stuff like that, it's a low item, and where they make their money really are on the beer and wine. And whether or not you've considered, obviously you can't propose legislation, but making recommendations that be looked at as a way of attracting these other stores.
Yeah, and we've heard similar comments from folks out at Economic Development Corporation, and we do have a sort of recommendation geared towards that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part, sir. You broke up just a bit.
I said thank you.
Oh, certainly, you're welcome.
I said thank you very much.
Thank you.
A good presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yes, I would like to agree with the comments made by my colleague. There is a lot of information in here, and I'm very familiar with this area for a number of reasons. And I think that sharing this with the members of the council will help them to make some decisions about the future of this area. There are great possibilities here. Some we've begun many years ago, starting with the Sports and Learning Complex. We had some dreams and hopes at that time, and some of those have been realized, but there's a long way to go. And I think this document will help our leaders to focus on that area and hopefully make some decisions about further growth in that area. Well done, and thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. I'm happy. I feel like this captures all the elements and all the pieces that we've been talking about for a long time. I think it's a sort of a succinct way to bring in the the sort of the work, the energy of the county exec shop, the council priorities, the community priorities. There's partnerships all over the place here that are pretty clear that your work is being informed by the conversations you're having with other key partners. And it's very, very helpful. So I think this is an excellent blueprint for moving forward. And to the points of my colleagues, there are all sorts of things that we want to get done that aren't in our control. But this lays the groundwork for that all. And I agree with Commissioner Giraldo. The more as appropriate, the more there's a way to note the kinds of strategies that could be helpful, even if they're not in our shop. As those things, I don't know if it's actually don't know, Mr. Skibitsky, if it's appropriate to do this, but to have a section or have comments related to recommendations from other agencies, what we have heard of priorities from other agencies. Is that the kind of thing that can fit into a document like this?
Yeah, certainly. We're actually in that process now where we have shared out the draft plan document with various external agencies, State Highway Association, Department of the Environment, DPW&T, and so forth. And we're now in the process of receiving comments from them to ensure that we're including all of their goals and recommendations. Just to make sure that there's nothing important that they're trying to accomplish that's missing. So
Okay,
yeah,
that's great.
we're wrapping that up now. We've received comments from about half of the agencies, and trying to push a little bit to get some more.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. It's very helpful. It's a great product. I can only imagine, as we all can, how much work goes into this. So I imagine there's a few evenings and weekends involved too.
There will be, for sure.
Right. But thank you for all the excellent work to you and your team. Now we do have a action item here. There's a request for us to approve and transmit an extension request for 4 months to the district council. So colleagues, what is your pleasure on this request?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the 4-month extension for the Central Avenue Blue Silver Line Sector Plan and Sectional Map Amendment, in addition to approving the extension letters capturing same and transmit to District Council, to the
Second.
District Council.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion?
No, just great job, great presentation, team.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you very much.
No discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thanks again, team. Well done.
Great. Thank you, Chair Shapiro. Thank you.
We have no consent agenda items, commissioners. We'll go to our regular agenda items. First is item 5, preliminary plan of subdivision 4-23044, Alexander Landing. We have Mr. Hatcher who's representing the applicant. We have Mr. Diaz-Campbell who will be giving the staff presentation. This is an evidentiary hearing. If we have folks who are going to be testifying, I'll swear them in at the appropriate time. And let me start with staff. Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Good morning and take it away.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I am Eddie Diaz-Campbell, Planner 3 of the Subdivision Section. Item number 5 on the agenda is the preliminary plan of subdivision for Alexander Landing, 4-23044. Subject project proposes 61 lots and 11 parcels for development of single-family attached dwellings for the elderly. The application is subject to approved certificate of adequacy ADQ-2023-076. The site is also subject to approved special exception SE-4856. The applicant submitted one exhibit prior to the noon deadline on October 8, 2024. The exhibit includes requested revisions to the staff recommended conditions of approval. Staff is in agreement with all of the requested revisions. No citizens have provided any feedback or signed up to speak on this case. Staff recommend adoption of the findings of the technical staff report, approval of Type 1 Tree Conservation Plan TCP 1-029-2024, and approval of the prelim plan submission, subject to conditions contained in the staff report, as modified by applicant's Exhibit 1. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Commissioners, any questions for staff before I turn to the applicant? No questions. Mr. Hatcher, good morning. Do you want to muck up the works or anything you want to add to this?
For the record, my name is Chris Hatcher with the law firm CL Hatcher LLC, with office here in Laurel. Here on behalf of the applicant ESC 9401 Westphalia LC, here for this preliminary plan application associated with TCP1. Yeah, we take subtle hints with that. The applicant respectfully, we did submit an applicant's exhibit into the record, and as you heard from planning staff, they did accept the proposed conditions. We're prepared to go through them if the planning board would like, and we do have several members of our team who are available to speak if the board does have requests. With that, the applicant respectfully requests that the planning board accept the findings of fact and conclusions of law contained in the staff report, as well as the conditions as amended by the applicant's exhibit, and approve this preliminary plan as well as the associated TCP1.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. So you are in alignment with staff on any of the revised conditions?
As revised by the applicant's exhibit, yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And Mr. Diaz-Campbell, I'll turn back to you. I just want to make sure that you all are aligned with the applicant on this.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we're in agreement with all of the modifications on applicant's Exhibit 1.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant on this item? No questions. We have nobody from the public who has signed up to speak. Unless anyone else has anything to add, I will close this public hearing and I will turn it over to you all. What is your pleasure on this item, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve preliminary plan 4-23044 and TCP 1-024-2024, subject to the conditions as outlined in staff's report and is further modified by applicant exhibit number 1.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington?
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey?
But I
vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Hatcher, very much. And thank you to your team. And Mr. Diaz-Campbell, thank you as well. Move on to item 6 on our agenda, Countywide Planning Division. This is mandatory referral, MRF 2024-03, the Gateway Project at Bowie State University. We have Mr. Bobby Ray giving a staff presentation with other expertise from our staff, if needed. And I think that's it. Yeah, turn over to Mr. Ray.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can, sir. Thanks.
Thank you. So good morning, Chair Shapiro, members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Bobby Ray from the Countywide Planning Division. This item is a mandatory referral application for a new student housing project on the Bowie State University campus. The project is called the Gateway, given its location at the entrance to the university. Next slide, please. The site is located in Council District 4 and Planning Area 71A. Next slide. The 2-acre site is located at the intersection of Laurel Bowie Road and Jericho Park Road. Next slide. The current zoning of the property is AG, Agriculture and Preservation. Next slide. And as you can see from the aerial map, the property is largely wooded and obviously undeveloped at this time. Next slide. Again, the parcel is undeveloped at this time and is largely vegetation, woods. Next slide. The master plan right-of-way identifies MD 197 or Laurel Bowie Road as a arterial road, and Jericho Park Road is classified as a collector level road. Next slide. The proposed building is 80 feet in height. It will have approximately 173,000 square feet of area, 205 residential units, and hopefully we are looking for ground floor retail to occupy the first level. Next slide. Notification was mailed by the planning department to property owners and civic associations on August 19th of 2024. The applicant has worked closely with the city of Bowie, and a briefing was held with the city council on April 5th. We did receive a letter from the city of Bowie Director of Planning and Sustainability indicating the city's support of the design and the proposed function of the project. Next slide. Other permitting agencies involved in the project review will be Maryland Department of the Environment, DPI, and WSSC. Next slide. So from the site plan on the left, you can see the layout of the three wings of the building along the three street frontages and the courtyard that's created by the building design. The surface parking lot is located adjacent to the courtyard, and the vehicular access is from or to that parking lot. So on the campus map to the right, you can see the location of the proposed building in relation to the rest of the school campus. Next slide. As far as staff recommendations, the majority of them focus on pedestrian and bicycle circulation, EV parking in the surface parking lot, and participation in the capital bike share program. And with that, that concludes staff's presentation. The applicant and their consultant team are here and available to answer any questions as well that the board might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Commissioners, any questions for staff or questions for members of the team that's working with Bowie State on this? No questions. The only thing I have is do you have anything that shows the bike ped, the connectivity, the wayfinding, anything that connects this in and integrates this into campus? Was that a conversation, Mr. Ray? Or maybe this is for Mr. Reeves or members of the development team or something like that. I'm just curious about how this integrates in with campus.
Yeah, I would defer to the applicant. I believe they're well represented this morning.
Yeah, this is Michael Harris, Assistant Director for Planning and Construction at Bowie State University. This question was raised in our original presentation, and I said at that time that there's a lot of intentionality of making bicycle paths and connectivity on the campus. In fact, the building across the street, which is called the Entrepreneurship Living and Learning building, we were actually made to widen that road, in front of that building, and we are currently in construction of a bicycle path there. Unfortunately, the rest of Jericho Park Road doesn't provide the connectivity as yet. So for the first part of our initiative is really to have bicycling or cycling around the campus. For all our buildings, which are now LEED certified, they all have bicycle racks in front of them. So with further development on Jericho Park, with further widening of Jericho Park Road, we can have safe cycling within the vicinity of the campus. But presently, as constructed, it is difficult as it stands now to have safe cycling on the streets. Even on the Jericho Park Road, which is just a connection road. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Appreciate that information. And I don't know from a staff perspective, Mr. Ray, if there's anything that we can put in as part of the mandatory referral to encourage that kind of connectivity, or maybe it's already in there. I'm not sure.
Well, we do have a recommendation number 6, which is to construct a 5-foot wide dedicated bike lane along Jericho Park Road from MD 197 to the Loop Road, which is the interior road to the campus. With the mandatory referral, we can encourage it. and I believe our transportation staff have a few conditions in here that discuss both pedestrian and bicycle circulation. With
Okay,
you know,
all right,
specific
that's helpful.
recommendations.
That's helpful for me. That addresses the concerns that I had. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chair, I have one question
Yes,
for
sir.
staff. Whether or not I like the referral for the capital bike share, was there any consideration for the electric scooters?
Not to my knowledge. I believe we do have perhaps staff from transportation planning section online if they have any comment on that, but I don't recall it coming up in our discussions.
Mr. Tenenbaum?
Yeah, for the record, Evan Tenenbaum, Transportation Planning Section. We did review the location for the Capital Bike Share space station. With the electric scooters, most of those micromobility agencies are dockless, so they can be provided upon request by Bowie State or the development. Usually they can be located at preferably the same location. Obviously, since they're dockless, they can be really parked anywhere that's not within the space of the sidewalk. So likely next to the Capital Bike Share Station would be the most appropriate, but we did not specifically locate.
Thank you very much.
All right. That triggers a question for me, actually, if I may jump in. The question of with this kind of student housing, I'm curious about what other amenities that get provided that we typically see and encourage in a non-student housing development. Maybe this is a question for Mr. Reeves. I don't know, but I was even channeling my inner Commissioner Giraldo and wondering whether in a product like this we look for a dog park or anything like that, or maybe the campus doesn't allow dogs in the student housing. I don't know, but I'd be curious to just hear even just a nutshell version of how you approach that.
Yeah, we only allow service dogs right now.
You do only service dogs? Okay,
yeah.
All right. Well, doesn't that hurt recruitment for students? No? I guess I'm out of my... All right, I'll leave it to you to figure that
out. Maybe we need to hear more about it.
I know, right. That feels like the wrong direction, but just saying, I'm a dog guy. I can't help it. Mr. Reeves, you're on mute. We still can't hear you, sir. Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, we work really collaboratively with the university to create, it's really an apartment style building, and we did seek to amenitize it in a way that it would really meet a market demand, even though it's geared towards students, primarily upper class people. In terms of the outdoor space, we brought on a high quality landscape designer as a part of our team to really make sure that the outside has really great sitting spaces, communal spaces that tie in, as well as to the retail space. It's a food and beverage use that will have the ability for the community to also come on campus and share in that space. So we really look to provide an amenity that both suits the school, but also the county and people that want to come to the county and have a place to really experience the joy of the campus. So the problem with that site is that not only its shape as a wedge, it's tight. So there's only so much we could really fit in that space to make everything work. But to the best of our ability, we really did provide a highly amenitized building with really great spaces for the community as well as students.
All right. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Commissioners, any other questions for staff or the applicant or the team? Seeing none, I want to thank everybody for all your work on this. Commissioners, what is your pleasure on this mandatory referral?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt staff recommendations and approve the transmittal of MRF-2024-003 to Bowie State University. Attention, Mr. Michael Harris.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington?
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Mr. Harris, Mr. Ray, Mr. Reeves, thanks everybody. You and all your team. Appreciate all the work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Move on to item 7 on our agenda. This is an extension request for preliminary plan 4-21003 Town Square at Suitland Federal Center Phase 4. Just to note that this was approved by the Planning Board on July 8th, is valid through September 8, 2024, and the request is to make this valid through September 8, 2025. We have Ms. Gupta who will give the staff presentation. I may have stolen some of her thunder. We have Mr. Horn, who will be representing the applicant, or I see Mr. Antonetti, who may be representing Mr. Horn. And we will turn to Ms. Gupta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for doing my job.
In an inferior way, but yes.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, I'm Mridula Gupta with the subdivision section. Item number 7 on the agenda is an extension request for preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21003, titled Town Square at Suitland Federal Center, Phase 4. This preliminary plan approved 6 parcels for development of 270 multifamily dwelling units and 204,840 square feet of commercial development. By letter dated August 7th, 2024, the applicant requested 1-year extension of the plan's approval. If this request is approved, the preliminary plan of subdivision will be valid through September 8, 2025. As stated in the staff's memorandum, staff found that the request met all the required criteria and recommend that the planning board grant a 1-year extension for preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21003. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta. If there's no questions for staff, commissioners, I'll turn to the applicant, Mr. Antonetti. Anything you want to add on this?
Good morning, Chair Shapiro, members of the Planning Board. For the record, Robert Antonetti with the law firm of Shipley and Horn. I am here on behalf of my partner, Arthur Horn, who couldn't be with us today, unfortunately. I have Mr. Andrew Shelley, our land planner and senior paralegal with me as well. We thank you for your consideration and Ms. Gupta's presentation and report. This is evidence of how planning and development work together. Seeing the Blue Line Corridor plan being discussed and developed, here at the Suitland Federal Center, this is an example of planning and then implementation. The additional year is needed for the reasons set forth in the applicant's letter and in the staff report. We're hopeful that we can continue to move this important project forward in this portion of the county, and we thank you for your consideration of this request.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony. Questions for the applicant, commissioners? Seeing none, I'm sorry. If there's no questions, then what's your pleasure on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the request for 1-year extension for preliminary plan 4-21003.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
But aye.
Commissioner Giraldo. You're
I
on
vote
mute.
aye. I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Antonetti, and thank you, Ms. Gupta. Move on to item 9 on our agenda. One sec.
Got 8.
Okay, sorry about that. Item 9 on our agenda is extension request for a preliminary plan 4-21022, First Baptist Church of Highland Park. We have Mr. D.S. Campbell, who giving the staff presentation. Mr. Tedesco is representing the applicant. And I'll turn it over to staff. Take it away, Mr. D.S. Campbell. Are you on mute, sir?
Thank you. Yes, good morning again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, for the record, I'm Eddie Diaz-Canel with the subdivision section. Item 9 on the agenda is an extension request for preliminary plan subdivision 4-21022, First Baptist Church of Highland Park. This preliminary plan subdivision approved 1 parcel for development of 138 multifamily dwelling units and 128,112 square feet of
Mr. Diaz-Campbell, can you hold on one sec?
Mm-hmm.
Did I inadvertently skip item 8?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought you didn't. I thought you, well, I won't tell you what I thought.
Ms. Tellerico, is it okay if I just stop doing what we're doing, go right back to item 8?
That would be acceptable. Yes.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Diaz-Campbell, pause. Now I know why you were on mute and distracted. Item 8 on our agenda, folks, is a request for refund of a filing fee for a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-23001 Valley View. Ms. Gupta is giving the staff presentation on this. Mr. Foreman will be representing the applicant, and we'll turn to you, Ms. Gupta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, good morning, everyone. For the record, I'm Ridula Gupta with the subdivision section. Item number 8 on the agenda is a request for a refund of filing and sign posting fee for a preliminary plan of subdivision application that was withdrawn prior to public release of the technical staff report. This preliminary plan of subdivision 4-23001, titled Valley View, was accepted for review on May 30th, 2024, under the prior subdivision regulations and zoning ordinance. In a letter dated September 19th, 2024, the applicant withdrew this preliminary plan of subdivision. As stated in the staff memorandum, staff find that the applicant is eligible for a refund of 50% of the filing fee and 100% of the sign posting fee, since the technical staff report had not been released at the time of the application withdrawal and the sign posting had not occurred. Staff recommend that the planning board approve the request for the refund of the filing fee and the sign posting fee for 4-23001 in the amount of $2,076. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta. No questions for staff. Mr. Foreman, anything you want to add in this item?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Just for the record, Nate Foreman on behalf of the applicant with O'Malley, Miles, Nyland, and Gilmore. We agree with Ms. Gupta's assessment, and we would recommend or request that this board adopt her staff report as its findings. Thank you very much.
Foreman. Thank you very much. Commissioners, if there's no questions, action on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt staff recommendations and approve the request for the refund of filing and sign posting fees for preliminary plan 4-23001 in the amount of $2,076.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Vice Chair Bailey. With no discussion, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Foreman, and thank you, Ms. Gupta. All right, we're back in the midst of item 9 on our agenda, and we were hearing from Mr. Diaz-Campbell with the staff presentation. And if you can take it from the top, Mr. Diaz-Campbell, the floor is yours.
All right. Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I'm Eddie Diaz-Campbell with the subdivision section. Item number 9 on the agenda is an extension request for preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21022, First Baptist Church of Highland Park. This preliminary plan of subdivision approved one parcel for development of 138 multifamily dwelling units and 128,112 square feet of existing institutional uses. The preliminary plan was approved by the planning board on March 3rd, 2022, and it was valid through March 24, 2024. By letter dated September 6, 2024, the applicant requested a 1-year extension of the plan's approval. This is the applicant's first extension request. If this request is approved, the preliminary plan of subdivision will be valid through March 24, 2025. Staff has provided a memorandum which evaluates the extension request for its conformance to the required criteria for approval and extension, which are contained within the prior subdivision regulations. Staff found that all the criteria were met except for the first criterion, which states that an extension may be granted provided that the request is filed prior to the expiration of the preliminary plan approval. In this case, the applicant has provided that unique and tragic circumstances led to the applicant not filing the request for extension prior to March 24, 2024. Therefore, staff defers to the planning board on whether a 1-year extension may be granted. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Canel. And Commissioners, I'm sure we'll hear from Mr. Tedesco with a bit more detail into exactly what the circumstances were that have led to this. It is a very tragic and unfortunate situation that we have before us for us to consider essentially bending our rules a bit. So let me turn to Mr. Tedesco, and you can fill us in a bit more.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. And members of the Planning Board, for the record, Matthew Tedesco, here on behalf of both Community Housing Initiative Incorporated and First Baptist Church of Highland Park, which are partners in this development project. First and foremost, I want to thank Director Hall, David Warner, Ms. Tellerico, as well as Ms. Sherry Connor and Eddie Diaz-Campbell. We have spent a lot of time discussing this matter over the last month, as you can imagine, given the circumstances that befell this particular application and this applicant in particular, regarding the very tragic and untimely passing of my partner, Mr. Dan Lynch. Dan passed away in November, as you all know, and I know you all remember Dan very fondly. This detailed site plan associated with this preliminary plan was actually one of, if not his very last planning board hearing before you all last summer, 2023. Unfortunately, the circumstances were such that at the time, obviously, of his passing, this particular applicant was not represented from that time, leading up to that time, and since that time until I was contacted in late August. And at that moment, we became aware of the issue with respect to the validity of the preliminary plan of subdivision. Notwithstanding, and has been articulated in great detail in our letter, it's about 11 pages, as well as in your staff report, both the applicant and staff have continuously pursued everything that was needed in order to vest both the preliminary plan as well as the detailed site plan, to include the filing of plats before the expiration of the validity period, as well as pursuing the certification of the detailed site plan, TCP2, and subsequent easements associated with the woodland conservation requirements, for which is what preempted my involvement to assist with the latter. From the moment I was engaged and brought on, we have been working very closely with your legal team, as well as the planning director and your chief of development review. And I just want to publicly thank them for getting us to this point here today. I do want to also acknowledge the fact that, as you all know, and as your counsel probably can eloquently advise, maybe better than I could, but you all are granted with the sole and absolute discretion to interpret and administer the subdivision regulations. That's a authority granted to you by the state as it relates to the land use article in subtitle 24. And what we are asking for today is basically your interpretation and application of the statute to grant a one-year extension, which is really a misnomer, because if this is approved, which we hope it is today approved, it doesn't grant a year from today. It's a year from March. So really what we're doing is asking for a 6-month extension at this point, given where we are, maybe even less, which I think theoretically or in principle would have been granted, but for the very tragic circumstances that belied this particular applicant, which aren't exclusive to just the untimely and sad passing of my partner, but also other extenuating circumstances that are extremely unique, and I would dare say a one-off as it relates to this project and the circumstances that befell it. So with all that being said, I just want to again highlight what this application is. It's an application for a senior apartment building. The county has invested as recently as Tuesday of this week in adopting 2 council resolutions with the associated allocation of $2.5 million from the county's housing investment trust fund for this project, as well as a resolution associated with a pilot agreement for payment in lieu of taxes for this project, to provide what's desperately needed in the county, not only housing, but housing for our seniors and affordable housing at that. So there is exceptionally, not only exceptional extenuating circumstances surrounding this request, but also exceptional extenuating circumstances that surround
what this project will actually bring. And with the approval of this extension, it will facilitate the ability to not only finish the platting process, which we started in January, to get that plat vested, but also obviously move forward with the project that is right now at a critical path associated with its funding and its funding mechanisms and sources, both with the county as well as with the state. So we also have with us, Mr. Chairman, I probably should have said that from the outset, but we have representatives of both Community Housing Initiative, but we also have with us representatives of the First Baptist Church of Highland Park, Pastor Davis. And I just would like to give him a minute or two, just maybe to address the planning board. I know in previous applications, although I didn't handle them, the board indulged Pastor Davis for a moment or two just to explain the importance of this project. So if it's okay with the board, I would just like to turn it over to Pastor Davis at this time, just for a brief statement, and then I can conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Commissioners, without objection, I'm happy to hear from Pastor Davis as well. Pastor Davis, take it away.
Chairman Shapiro, delighted to be here and planning board. Yes, we do see this as a very exciting project in terms of being able to have seniors to have affordable housing. Our church already has a number of things that I think are enhancing our community, and this would allow us to do even more in terms of for now our senior population on our campus. Now we also, it's our church campus, it's our school, it's community, and then of course with the access to all the things that we have within the church now, and even our future planning that we're planning right there on our grounds, so that we can really, in essence, really help their whole lives to be better, and really allowing them not only to have housing, but also to have activities within a very close radius. Of course, we have a lot of programs for seniors, so not only are we able to have persons to have to live there, but then we really already have built-in activities that would also enhance their lives. And so, again, we certainly appreciate you all listening to us this morning in terms of our plea and even our desires for continued expansion, because as we always try to look at our church as a city on the hill that is really encompassing all of these things that are enhancing the lives of people, but also bettering the community.
Thank you, Pastor Davis. Much appreciated.
Mr. Chairman, so I would just conclude again by just reiterating that it is our belief that you all do have the discretion in interpreting this particular code provision to grant the relief that's requested, understanding the circumstances that we are all under, given what occurred in this particular case, which again, I just want to highlight exceptionally unique, very extraneous and tragic circumstances that I think provide some layer of protection given its uniqueness. And we would very respectfully and humbly and graciously request the board's consideration for what has been requested as a 1-year extension, but would in actuality be just an extension until March 24, 2025, which is for 5 or 6 months from now. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we're happy to answer any questions. Again, I just want to publicly thank the board, thank the planning director, as well as your legal team and your development review team for their consideration, understanding, and for their very well-balanced recommendation or report, and leaving the recommendation up to you all to make the deciding decision on this one. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Commissioners, thoughts on this, reactions, questions, concerns? Staff is deferring to us because it's such an unusual situation, and I'm curious where you are all with this.
Mr. Chair, I'm okay with it. I just want clarification. So the extension would just be to March of 2025. Is that right?
Right.
That's correct.
Okay. I have no problem with it, given the circumstances and the discretion afforded to us as a board.
Yeah, I'm right there with Commissioner Giraldo. Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's tragic and extenuating circumstances to say the least. So I'm perfectly fine with moving forward, and I don't think it creates any, dangerous precedent for us in this regard.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to associate myself with the comments made by my colleagues. I agree.
Thank you. Thank you all. I tend to agree with you all. I think I'm very hesitant to, to the rules are fairly black and white, but we do have the discretion. These are extenuating circumstances, and I certainly align myself with all of your remarks in that regard. So, and I certainly understand why staff would defer to us on this, because their strict interpretation would likely lead them to a different conclusion. But that is our job. This is our role to make calls like this. So. Without any objection, I think that makes sense to me too, and I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the request for a one-year extension of preliminary plan 4-21022.
Second.
Thank you. We've got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Just under explanation, that means that if the request is approved, the preliminary plan will be valid through March 24, 2025.
25.
No, March 24 is a date. 2025 is the year. But thank you. Any other discussion on this? If not, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thanks to everybody for all of your extensive work and discussion and collaboration on this. And I think we ended up in a good place. So thanks, everybody.
All done.
Item 10 on our agenda. Unless I skipped one, no, we're okay. Item 10, preliminary plan of subdivision PPS 2024-001 Smith Lake Estates. This was continued from planning board meeting of October 3. Well, again, Mr. Tedesco is representing the applicant. We have Mr. Diaz-Campbell, who is will give the staff presentation on this, and turn to Mr. Diaz-Campbell. This is an evidentiary hearing. If we have anyone who signed up to speak, I'll swear them into the appropriate time. Mr. Diaz-Campbell, take it away.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I'm Eddie Diaz-Campbell, planner through the subdivision section. Item number 10 on the agenda is the preliminary plan of subdivision for Smith Lake Estates, EPS-2024-001. This case was continued from last week's planning board agenda. The subject project proposes 143 lots and 17 parcels for development of 75 single-family detached dwellings and 68 single-family attached dwellings. The application is subject to approved certificate of adequacy ADQ-2024-001. The site is also subject to approved zoning map amendment ZMA-2022-003-C, which placed the property in the residential plan development or RPD zone. There are 5 items of additional backup for this case. Applicant's Exhibit 1 includes requested changes to the findings and conditions of approval recommended in the technical staff report pertaining to public utility easements and bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Applicant's Exhibit 2 is the applicant's agreement to enter into a public safety mitigation plan for fire response time adequacy. Applicant's Exhibit 3 is a letter from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Centers, or FLETC, raising concerns about development of Como Road. Citizens Exhibit 1 is a letter staff received from a resident of the Williamsburg Estates subdivision, raising their concerns about the proposed development. And Staff Exhibit 1 is a staff response to the applicant's requested changes to the findings and conditions of the staff report, which agrees with the ones pertaining to public utility easements, but contains alternate findings and conditions pertaining to bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Before addressing the recommended revisions to findings and conditions, I would like to address the comments received in Citizens Exhibit 1. The concerns raised by the letter include the volume of traffic on Frank Tippett and Rosaryville roads, residents typically exiting neighborhoods along these roads onto the main roadways, developer improvements to infrastructure, resident participation in the traffic study, and environmental and wildlife preservation. With regard to the concerns about traffic, exiting existing neighborhoods, and developer improvements in infrastructure. For the Associated Certificate of Adequacy ADQ-2024-001, the applicant submitted a traffic study to evaluate the traffic generated by the proposed development, which was reviewed by transportation planning staff. The traffic study evaluated 8 critical intersections located both to the north and south of the development, including the intersection of Frank Tippett Road and Rosaryville Road, and the intersection of Williamsburg Drive and Rosaryville Road, which is one of the entrances to the Williamsburg Estates subdivision. The approved certificate found that all of the critical intersections would operate at acceptable levels of service, so long as specific improvements were made at the intersection of Frank Tippett Road and Surratt's Road, and the intersection of Dower House Road and Maryland 223. Improvements to these intersections are included as conditions of approval of the Certificate of Adequacy. Other intersections along Rosaryville Road and Frank Tippett Road, accessing existing subdivisions, were not found to be critical intersections, and so no improvements are required at these intersections. With regard to the concern about resident participation in the traffic study, the applicant was required to provide notice of the development application to the community and opportunities for residents to provide feedback. These include the pre-application neighborhood meeting, notice of the application submittal, and notice of the planning board hearing, all of which were completed. At any point prior to the application submittal or following it, residents may get in touch with the applicant or staff to share concerns. With regard to concerns about protection of the environment and wildlife, the development will be required to meet the requirements of the Woodland and Wildlife Habitat Conservation Ordinance. The Type 1 tree conservation plan submitted with the permitting plan demonstrates preservation of the regulated environmental features on site to the fullest extent possible, and the entire woodland conservation requirement will be met on site. Staff reviewed and support the applicant's requests for impacts to the regulated environmental features and variance for the removal of specimen trees, as discussed in the findings of the staff report. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources also provided guidelines for minimizing the risk of sedimentation in the aquatic habitat of the adjacent Piscataway Creek, and the applicant will need to obtain a joint federal-state wetlands permit for impacts to the stream. For the next part of the presentation, I'd like to request that slide 9 be placed on screen. All right. Applicant's Exhibit 3, the letter from the FLETC, raises concerns surrounding vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle access to Como Road. Como Road serves as the access road to an FLETC facility, and the FLETC letter expressed their position that such access could create safety and security concerns for the facility. No vehicular access to Como Road is proposed. However, shared roadway bikeway facilities and a frontage sidewalk could be required along Como Road to meet the policies of the 2009 Master Plan of Transportation and the 2013 Subregion 6 Master Plan. There is an existing destination along Como Road, known as Cheltenham Wetlands Park, which would benefit from improved access should these bicycle and pedestrian facilities be provided. Staff is recommending that the shared roadway bikeway facilities be provided on Como Road, subject to the approval of the permitting agency, because they would not require additional pavement or right-of-way, and so would have no impact on the roadway. Staff recognizes, however, that a frontage sidewalk may not be the best way of improving pedestrian access to the park, due to site constraints and environmental factors, such as specimen trees and regulated environmental features abutting the roadway. To address these concerns while meeting the master plan recommendations, staff is recommending that pedestrian connectivity to the Cheltenham Wetlands Park be demonstrated at the time of detailed site plan. There are currently no trail facilities or sidewalks within or abutting the parkland which connect to the subject site. So to demonstrate pedestrian connectivity, the applicant should provide a pedestrian route within their subdivision that would allow for a future trail connection to the park facilities. The eventual off-site portion of the trail connection would be beyond the responsibility of the applicant. The pedestrian route may consist of frontage sidewalk along Como Road, an on-site trail extending westward from the internal subdivision streets, as shown conceptually in red on this slide. A combination of a trail segment and a sidewalk segment, or if none of these are feasible, an alternative opportunity for a connection that could be identified with the detailed site plan. It is noted that any improvements provided along the Como Road frontage would be subject to the approval of the permitting agency, the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement, or DPI. It is further noted that the United States, on behalf of the FLETC, previously owned the right-of-way of Como Road and conveyed it to the county with the right of reverter, which would allow them to reobtain ownership of the right-of-way if needed in the interest of national defense. DPI, in determining whether frontage improvements within the Como Road right-of-way should be approved, should consider any rights and restrictions which may be affected by the prior agreement between the U.S. and the county. As a final note, the applicant had a question about whether all the parkland northwest of the site counted as the Cheltenham Wetland Park. Some of the parkland may be known as the Piscataway Creek Stream Valley Park, to be concurrent with the master plan Piscataway Creek Trail, which runs through the parkland. So long as the applicant is able to demonstrate pedestrian connectivity to the parkland to the northwest, the master plan recommendations and the recommended condition 19 in Staff Exhibit 1 will be met. In conclusion, subdivision staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings and approve preliminary plan of subdivision PPS-2024-001, Smith Lake Estates, Type 1 Tree Conservation Plan TCP1-023-2024, as well as a variance from Section 25-122B1G, subject to conditions contained in the staff report, as modified by Staff Exhibit 1, with certain corrections which I will read into the record as follows. On page 2 of Staff Exhibit 1, or page 11 of the additional backup, in the second paragraph of the Parks and Recreation section, after the red underlined words, however, a sidewalk along the Como Road frontage should be provided in order to provide connectivity to the Cheltenham Wetlands Park, add the words, subject to approval by the permitting agency. Second, on page 4 of Staff Exhibit 1, or page 13 of the additional backup, in the third paragraph, add the words, the permitting agency, before the red underlined words, will have ultimate authority over whether frontage improvements will be required along Como Road. I'd like to thank the applicant for their help identifying these errors yesterday evening, and would also invite them to confirm whether they have any remaining concerns regarding the recommended revisions, findings, and conditions that are contained in Staff's Exhibit 1. And this concludes Staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz-Campbell. We'll hear from the applicant, certainly, to your point, your question, as we go through. Commissioners, any questions for staff before we turn to the applicant? No questions. Mr. Tedesco, take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be before you. For the record, Matthew Tedesco, the law firm of McNamee Hosey, here on behalf of the applicant, D.R. Horton Incorporated. I also have Ms. Dominique Lockhart with me. And we have representatives of the applicant, Griffin Burns and Matt Mudaman, who may or may not be on the line with us, but are certainly monitoring this hearing, as well as representatives of our consulting team being made up of Rogers Consulting, Mr. Charlie Howe, Rob Swam, and Christine Gillette. And from Lenhart Traffic and Consulting, we have Mike Lenhart, Nick Dribbin, and Ryan McAndrew with us this morning. We are very, very excited to be presenting this case to you all. This is the very first RPD zoned property in Prince George's County as a result of the countywide map amendment and the new zoning ordinance. You all will recall that you reviewed the zoning map amendment that subsequently went on to the zoning hearing examiner and then to the district council, which was approved. So we are now back before you on the preliminary plan of subdivision. And hopefully with the approval of this application, we'll soon be back before you on the detailed site plan to really put a stake in the ground as it relates to the new zoning ordinance and particularly these new planned development zones. And we are very anxious and optimistic that this will be a very successful example of the new zoning and the new zoning ordinance, and particularly the new planned development zone. I did want to just highlight very briefly in response to Ms. Carol Brown's letter that's in your additional backup. I agree with Mr. Diaz-Campbell's and your transportation planning staff's assessment with respect to the traffic impact associated with this. That was determined and approved with the certificate of adequacy. The particular unsignalized intersection leading into the Williamsburg Estates community was analyzed and does meet the unsignalized intersection test for adequate public facilities. In addition to notification, Mr. Campbell hit on it with respect to the amount of notice that was sent on this case, but I'd be remiss if I also didn't highlight the fact that during the zoning map amendment, in addition to what's required with this subdivision, preliminary plan of subdivision, we did provide informational mailing letters, acceptance mailing letters, pre-application neighborhood notice mailings. We posted for the pre-application neighborhood meeting. We posted for the planning board hearing on the zoning map amendment. And we actually did that twice because you all may recall when we had the first hearing under the new ordinance, which has now since been changed, but at that time there was a requirement for advertisement in the local newspapers for zoning map amendments to a PD zoning. So we actually came back and had a subsequent planning board hearing and reposted for that as well. Same is true for the zoning hearing examiner. We actually had two. So as it relates to this particular property and this application, all told, what I think we've posted more than 7 times and have subsequently sent out mailings, both informational acceptance as well as pre-application neighborhood meetings on a number of occasions. So this is probably the most advertised application I've ever handled, somewhat intentional under the new ordinance, but also as making sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So that has been well documented, and we would submit on that. Turning to staff's Exhibit 1, Mr. Diaz-Campbell's representations here this morning, it goes without saying that sometimes even the simplest things create a lot of discussion, and I think this case is one of them. Como Road has a very long history that goes back to the 80s, and we've been working very closely with your transportation planning section, your subdivision section, your parks department, as well as with DPI, and certainly the Federal Training Facility has provided its own letter, and there are very strong concerns about improvements to Como Road that would potentially increase vehicular, pedestrian, bicycle traffic along Como Road. Trying to balance that against their operations for that facility, trying to balance that against what Mr. Diaz-Campbell references with respect to the right of reverter in the deed that gives the federal government the absolute right at any moment to take back that right of way, creating a somewhat not purely public right of way, which was the determination of the Office of Law on 2 different occasions back in 1986 and more recently on this particular matter, making that finding because of the right of reverter. We've had to balance a lot of things on this case, and we got to a point with the applicants, with staff's Exhibit 1 that I think is not, from our perspective, there are some things in there we have concerns about, but we understand the direction in which we're all trying to go, which we are aligned in that direction. We look forward to the opportunity to continue to try to work with staff with respect to this trail alignment, which we do believe is an amenity to this particular project. There are significant environmental features that front on Como Road. There are ownership issues with respect to the property to the south and west, but we understand staff's desire to try to have some form of connection as best we can on feasibility, and we look forward to working with them on that at the time of detailed site plan. So with that, and with the additional corrections that Mr. Campbell referenced on additional backup page 11 and page 13, we don't have any issues with staff's Exhibit 1. I would just note for the record that the Federal Training Facilities letter does include both vehicular and pedestrian. I know there's some language in the finding that calls into question whether any actual improvements will in fact have that result. I don't think we need to debate that or decide that here today. If there is an issue, the Federal Training Facility will take back the rights to the right of way. But nevertheless, we're all trying to accommodate what the master plan and what this development can provide to the community. So I think with that, we're willing to accept staff's Exhibit 1 changes to findings as clarified by Mr. Campbell this morning. And in reference to new condition 19 that Mr. Campbell spoke to, I do want to publicly thank Eddie for his, and Eddie as well as Ms. Connor for their review of this application, and they're working with us. We wanted to make clear that the references in new condition 19 regarding the Cheltenham Wetland Park that term is synonymous or inclusive of the property to the north of this property currently owned by the commission, which is identified as Piscataway Stream Valley Part 2, that term is not exclusive, but inclusive of both those properties, which Mr. Campbell has clarified both here this morning and in emails to me. So with that, we are willing to accept staff's Exhibit 1 in addition to the new condition 19, and would look forward to working with staff on at the time of detailed site plan on, how best to make these connections while also balancing trying to not degrade the environmental features, which include streams, woodlands, and also significant topography in that area. But I'm confident between your experts and our experts that we can come to a solution at the time of detailed site plan that accommodates everyone's goals. So with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for your indulgence, for letting me go through that in a little detail. You've heard about 20 minutes of, I can tell you, hours and hours and hours of discussions and meetings, and not sure if I have the opportunity how many more times, but I just want to thank staff again for their work on this one, and especially Mr. Campbell, who he and I have spent a lot of time working on this one together. And I just want to publicly thank him for his professionalism, his courtesy, and his acknowledgement of trying to balance all the interests. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude there, and we will submit further on our statement of justifications that we've submitted into the record that are in your backup as further testimony here today, and happy to conclude and respectfully request your approval as recommended by staff.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Thank you for the detail. Much appreciated. And thank you for the kind words for staff as always. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant at this time? No questions. We do have somebody who signed up to speak on this. Do we have a Miss Carol Brown? Miss Brown, are you on the line? Okay. We don't have anyone who signed up to speak then. Commissioners, you've heard from staff, you've heard from the applicant. Staff and the applicant are aligned on this in terms of any conditions or changes that I have heard. Questions for either staff or the applicant? If not, I will close this public hearing. We're under deliberation, and if there's no deliberation, what's your pleasure on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff to include the revisions to findings as outlined in Staff Exhibit Number 1, in addition to the further revisions as read into the record by staff. And with that, approve preliminary plan to PPS-2024-001, TCP1-023-2024, and variance to section 25-122B1G, subject to the conditions as detailed in staff's report and is further modified by Staff Exhibit Number 1.
Second, and we did include new condition 19, right?
Yeah, that's in Staff Exhibit 1.
Okay. Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. I see Mr. Diaz-Campbell and Ms. Tellerico's hands up. Yes. Let me start with you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell.
Yes, just like to also request that the modifications to Staff Exhibit 1 that I read into the record be included.
I did include those.
Okay.
They were modifications of findings, yes.
Yes. And Ms. Tellerico, anything from you?
I wanted to just double check the variance section. Is it 122B1G or 119B1G? Just to flipping through the
staff
report
has 25-122, so.
Right. I've typically seen 119 for the specimen trees, and I just wanted to.
Let's we're certainly under no rush here, so let's get it right.
Right.
If we want to take a second, we've got the motion on the floor. We're in a discussion on that, and we're getting input on the motion from staff. Mr. Tedesco, Mr. Diaz-Campbell, Ms. Tellerico, anything?
122, I believe, is correct. 119 is the findings. I apologize for that.
Okay.
No,
right.
thank you for the double check.
Yeah. Okay, we're good to go then. That's the motion. Second, no further discussion. I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington,
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye, Mr. Chair.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Tedesco and Mr. Diaz-Campbell and Ms. Tellerico on this one as well. Thanks to everybody for all your work. Ms. Connor, any further business to come before the planning board today?
No further business. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You
Thank
too.
you.
So, commissioners, without objection, we are adjourned. Everybody have a good day.
Thanks. Have
You
a
as
good
well.
one.
Thank you.